everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to give a bit of a postmortem on the recent ARAM changes that Riot experimented with during the event and eventually did remove, and also kind of wanted to give my thoughts about champion bans in ARAM, as I know that's the biggest thing that people are here to talk about, and the biggest thing that people disliked about the changes that inevitably went live. Now, first and foremost, if you haven't seen the post yet, it was posted about last week, so mostly should have seen it, but if you didn't, Riot did confirm which changes they were actually going to be keeping from ARAM following their previous experiment. So, first and foremost, individual champion balance is going to stick around, which is very high-level champion balance. It's not mechanics, it's not specific numbers, it's generally things like plus 5% damage dealt, minus 5% damage dealt, that sort of thing on a champion-by-champion basis. Additionally, some adjustments to the rune system stuck around. The poke reduction, where if you get hit by a spell from a certain distance, you take less damage, that stuck around as well. And Riot are also keeping the changes that affect how long the game goes for. Now, generally, I think that most of these changes sticking around are fine. I think that champion balance isn't very fine-tuned, but it's better than nothing. It does do a lot of things to help adjust poke champions that have been super dominant, adjust certain champions like Sona who are just good overall. It does do a lot to help fix those champions and make them feel a little bit easier to deal with without also forcing Riot to go through a whole balance pass and changing individual numbers and trying to fine-tune things the way they do on Summoner's Rift. It's a good way to get at least some degree of balance without devoting a lot of time to it. I think the game length changes feels a little bit more on the punishing side. It really does feel like if you fall behind in ARAM now, it just ends. You have no chance to come back. But I understand the desire that Riot have for a shorter game length in ARAM. ARAM is always supposed to be the fast in, fast out game mode. It's always supposed to be, well, I only have time for one more tonight, let's just do an ARAM, because you don't have to worry about champ select, you don't have to worry about bans, you don't have to worry about anything. You just get into a lobby, you get handed your champions, you have a brief amount of time to get your rune set up, and then immediately you're going in a game, and hopefully that game is going to be shorter than a Summoner's Rift game. So it does make sense that it shouldn't be 30 to 45 minutes in length, because that's not really how historically ARAM has been treated. Obviously that might have changed since then, but I don't believe that's how people really want it to be. So that does make sense, even if it's a little bit more on the punishing side. Now, the things that Riot experimented with and eventually removed were the two experimental items, the Mariner's Vengeance and Ghostwalkers, the experimental summoner spell, Backtrack was removed, and finally, champion bans. I think the first two are understandable. They didn't really work out as intended. They led to some degenerate play patterns, and Backtrack in particular didn't get used on the champions they intended it for. Instead, it was just an additional safety net for long-range champions like Brand or Vel'Koz to just get out of jail free if you ever did get on top of them. So it did make sense that those get removed. They need to bind that summoner spell a little more heavily towards assassins and divers and other champions that are supposed to get some use out of it. However, the champion bans, I think, is the one thing that a lot of people have been very disappointed in, and probably the reason you clicked on this video in the first place. And so people are really, really upset that Riot did not keep champion bans. The primary reason for that being that you really don't feel like having champion bans, or not having champion bans in ARAM means that you can't really influence what champions you get to play against. Unlike any other game mode where you can really ban out those frustrating champions that you don't really want to see, in ARAM you no longer have that option. So if they happen to roll Jace, Xerath, and Sona, you just kind of feel like, well, that game is unwinnable now, and there's nothing we can actually do about it. So it does make sense, and I understand the frustration. Now, my opinion, obviously, is that bans being gone from ARAM is a good thing. I don't think that it made any sense to have them. And here's why, essentially. And I know Riot did talk about this, but I wanted to kind of try and explain it from a more layman's perspective. First and foremost, bans were always super targeted, unlike in Summoner's Rift, where some bans, it seems like, are always going to be present on Summoner's Rift, or at least common. Things like Zed, Yasuo, Riven of late, they're very much so going to be present, but there are always games where they won't get banned because maybe you don't really care, you're in an off position, you're not feeling like banning that champion, somebody is fine with playing against one of those champions, and they get through. And it feels like, okay, cool, so if you are someone who plays those champions, you have an opportunity to do so in that game. In ARAM, though, the champion bans were super targeted. There were certain champions that literally did not get played in ARAMs following champion bans. They were just straight up deleted from existence. And because ARAM isn't something where there's really a meta, you can't have a meta in a random game mode, those champions were just permanently banned. Which means that if you enjoy playing those champions, there's literally no chance for you to ever do so, which is a bit of a disappointment. And it does make sense, obviously as ARAM, you don't automatically get to play the champions you want, that's kind of the point of the game mode. At the very least, you could try rolling for the champion. You could try doing something or another in order to get that champion in the game mode. And with bans, there was zero possible chance for that to ever happen. Some people were disappointed with how it kind of went against the randomness of the game mode. ARAM is supposed to be all random, and it's hard to be random when you do have champion bans, because that means that not everything is on the table. That one, I think, is a bit of a moot point. I don't really care that much about it. But I think the targeted nature of the bans is the biggest strike against it, especially given that Riot are doing adjustments on an individual basis to champions. If there are champions that are super broken in ARAM, Riot have sort of committed to this very high level, this very light time pass on champions. So if something is busted like Sona, where you just never want to see a Sona on the enemy team, it makes Riot can nerf that champion on just a super high level. Say, well, you do 15% less healing, you do 15% less damage, and hopefully get her into a spot where when you see a Sona, you're not just completely disappointed to see her, and where the players themselves can still play as that champion. So hopefully that's a slightly better situation for us to be in, rather than just removing Sona, for example, from the pool entirely. I think that's a much worse position to be in. A sort of minor change as well, it did add extra time to a game mode that's supposed to be fast in and fast out. If it took you a lot longer to get to a point where you can, actually get into the game, because that's an additional 30 seconds where you have to ban things out, you're waiting for bans to conclude, you're thinking about what you want to ban, and it's just not really in the spirit of the game mode. The game mode is supposed to be completely random, and as another thing, it is completely random. So generally you do have about the same percentage of getting the broken champions as the enemy team, obviously accepting ARAM only accounts, which is what I'm going to talk about next. Obviously, the easiest thing to say is, well, if we can't have bans, why doesn't Riot make all of the champions available in ARAM? That would nerf ARAM only accounts that only unlock champions that are broken in ARAM in order to maximize their chances of rolling them, and it would really make the mode all random. You can get any champion in the game as opposed to just the ones you personally own. Why doesn't Riot do that? I mean, first and foremost, like I said, you can still get stupid comps even with all the champions unlocked. There is very possibly a chance that you still roll Lux, Xerath, Nidalee on your comp and just say, like, well, I guess this is a free win. Even with everything unlocked, it's still an opportunity. So it's not like making all the champions automatically available would nerf meaningfully the ability to get these kind of stupid compositions. It's still going to be a possibility, so it doesn't just remove that from play, unfortunately. The other thing, and the thing that Riot will never actually admit, because they really don't like ever talking about money or the financial side of things in public places, especially their forums or on Twitter or something, so I'm going to say it, it does hurt their revenue. They won't ever say it, but if you do play mostly ARAMs, then you have no reason to unlock any champions at all if all champions were unlocked, because, well, there's no point. You're not more likely to get any one champion over the other. There's no reason to ever spend your blue essence on champions. You may as well save it for, let's say, rune pages or anything else, maybe the BE Emporium when it comes around. There's actually zero emphasis to ever buy champions if every single champion is unlocked in an ARAM. And there are quite a few people who mostly play ARAMs. Obviously, I'm not talking about just ARAM only accounts, but people who just want to play casually or play with a few friends, and maybe they play Summoner's Rift every now and again, but who do play mostly ARAMs on average. So it doesn't make any sense, therefore, for Riot to unlock all champions from a purely financial side of things. Yes, they are still making a lot of money, but this is still a free-to-play game. They do depend very heavily on champion and skin sales in order to keep themselves in the black. It does make sense why they wouldn't make all the champions available in ARAM. So, as disappointing as that is to hear, I don't think there is really any way around it, unfortunately, for the foreseeable future. And I do think that putting faith in the champion balancing system is a much better way of going about things, because I think that will get the game into a slightly better place as opposed to where it currently is. So we'll have to see at the end of the day, but I think that's generally the reasoning for it, and I think that's generally where we should be looking at. So obviously, if you guys are still unhappy with that, let me know down in the comment section below, and let me know why you guys think bans should stay, knowing everything that we've just talked about today. The other really minor thing I did just want to cover real quick is the champion balancing. I think that, in all honesty, this kind of approach, though very high level and not great at getting things perfectly balanced, is great for any game modes that Riot don't plan on balancing long term or plan on super fine tuning. So especially for something like Twisted Treeline, I would love to see this approach actually deployed for Riot to, make some experimental items, do some of this high level champion balancing, add some summoner spells that may or may not be completely balanced, and just try things out, because it's a super fast iteration. You can incentivize people in the same way that you incentivize them to play ARAM with a bunch of missions that say play this game mode, and it does give you an opportunity to, you know, try these changes out and maybe get the game modes that you don't plan on balancing super well into a slightly better spot without committing a whole bunch of time too. So, but that's just generally my thoughts on that subject. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like. Would really enjoy to hear your thought on the ARAM adjustments and how you think that whole process went. And if you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. And if you're looking for more Grab the Lantern content, you can check out my blog, which is linked down in the description. I upload articles just about each and every single day for your enjoyment. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I will talk to you all later.